So, good afternoon again. Alex Mason from QTS. I'd like to first and foremost welcome everyone to our latest installment of our Webinar Wednesday series. Today's topic, what's new with Citrix XenApp and XenDesktop? And I have with me today Todd Smith, who will be presenting later on. So just a couple of housekeeping things before we kick off. Today's webinar is going to be recorded. You are in mute mode, so please hold your questions until the Q&A portion of the presentation later on. If you're unable to hear any of the audio, here are the dial-in codes, the access, and the webinar ID. So leave that there for just a second. All right, so who is QTS? If you're unfamiliar with the organization, Quality Technology Solutions, QTS is a 24-year-old service provider, systems integrator with 4 gold competencies, and I think we have, latest count was 4 silver as well. We've been serving the New York, New Jersey market. We started in legal and have adapted and really grown and changed over the years. So multiple award winners. We actually just received the New Jersey Microsoft Partner Network Partner of the Year Award for 2016. We were also honored to be a finalist for the nationwide and international awards as well. I think we were runner-up for the same award in 2012. So we've been locally managed for the last 15 years, and we really do rely on our strong talent, and we're very methodology focused. So that's us, and I want to kick it over to Todd and get started. So I'm just going to pass this over to him.
All right, thanks, Alex. My name is Todd Smith. I'm the Sales Engineering Manager for Citrix here in the Northeast for the commercial space. Been working with friends over at QTS for several years now, and I appreciate the opportunity to chat today about what's new with Citrix and specifically around XenApp and XenDesktop. So Alex, I don't think the slides are advancing.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. Still on. Yeah, looks like I don't have keyboard and mouse.
Oops. Technical difficulties. The webinar gods are not with us today, unfortunately. That's okay. I can advance them for you.
Okay, that'd be great.
All right, cool. And there we go.
Okay, so one of the things we want to talk about today, there's 4 key categories. One of them is around the experience that Citrix brings to the user, around security. The third one is around flexibility, and we've also introduced a new approach towards our release schedules. So a combination of a current release, which is more rapid deployment of product updates and things like that, and the long-term service release, which would allow you as a customer to maintain a longer release strategy. So for instance, if you don't have a need to upgrade your Citrix environment once a quarter or once a year, you can choose to extend it all the way up to as far as 5 years out as part of that long-term service release. So it's fully supported to extend it out, extend that timeline out a little bit further. So one of the things we want to talk about, I think the experience slide is up right now. So it really is around delivering applications, desktops, and services out to the user in a way that's beneficial to them. So as an example, nobody wants to deploy an application or some type of service that's going to be worse than the prior methods, right? So being able to create that delightful experience that's on demand when the user needs to have access to it, that is fully seamless. So that means when I have applications that are running being delivered via Citrix, I can have access to them, whether those applications are locally installed or running inside a virtualized application stack or in a virtual desktop. And the final thing is making it all very intuitive to the user. Can I get the next slide? So the first thing around experience has really been around those graphic intensive applications. We have seen an incredible growth in the amount of user-based, non-structured data that's being used. And non-structured data could include things like raw data files that are going into some type of business intelligence engine, some type of, a Hadoop or a large-scale data analysis tool. It could be video, it could be voice, it could be a combination of those. But a lot of that puts a requirement out there for a lot of resources on graphics. So we need to be able to come up with a way to improve that user density. So being able to have more users access these highly graphics intensive applications, at the same time reducing our requirements for bandwidth, and then also being able to support those legacy devices. And we'll kind of go through a couple of examples here. We introduced HDX graphics compatibility mode, which gave us some increase in user density, reduction in the bandwidth, and also being able to support those devices that are not the current H.264 limitations or requirements. The other benefit is being able to support it on all of these different receivers regardless of what device they happen to be on. So if you're connecting from, as an example, if you're connecting from a thin client device into a virtual application or a virtual desktop, we completely support that. If you're connecting from a mobile device such as an iPad or an iPhone or some type of tablet device or even a Windows phone, you have full access to those applications. The graphics all work, the input-output devices all work. And we're also seeing a significant increase in the interest around things like Linux and being able to run a Linux-based desktop, whether you're talking about education or whether you're talking about customer service, some type of kiosk mode, or even in manufacturing. There seems to be a lot of interest being popped up around Linux devices. So can I get the next slide, Alex? The other main thing around the user experience has been around Skype for Business. With Microsoft acquiring Skype and integrating that with the functionality that used to be in Lync and prior to that Office Communicator, they basically announced last year, and we introduced it as part of our Summit event earlier this year in January, version 2 of the architecture to be able to allow us to fully deliver Skype for Business in a virtual environment, whether it be on XenApp, which is our application virtualization piece, or in XenDesktop, and give the user that native UI experience so they don't even, there's no difference between running it in a virtual environment or running it in a physical environment. And we're seeing a lot of customers starting to express interest, Skype for Business, and that's being pushed primarily by a lot of the Microsoft new applications, and a lot of their applications are being built around that constant real-time communications piece of it. So can I get the next slide? The other thing that's happening, and this is something that started off with NVIDIA. NVIDIA started off as a virtual GPU company, and the latest go-around is Intel has now introduced the Iris Pro graphics, which are fully compatible with Citrix, with HDX, as well as being able to take that virtual GPU and assign it to multiple machine instances, whether it be virtual desktops or virtualized applications, in a pass-through mode. So that means that there's no interacting, there's no driver replacement that has to occur. There's full API support. So if you if you need to have multiple monitor support, being able to do high-end 3D graphics, whether it be in engineering environment, whether it be manufacturing, or whether it be in healthcare. We see an awful lot of this with the ability to review patient records and especially MRI studies and things like that. We're also seeing, this is kind of an interesting use case of graphics, the virtualizing the graphics processing is around some of the financial services and analytics organizations that they're using the power of the graphics processor not to do all the time graphics, but they're certainly using it to help offset some of the CPU hits that comes when you're doing large analytical studies. So there's a benefit there as well. Can I get the next slide? And the next thing is around those 3D graphics, right? So traditionally, 3D graphics were something that would require a very specific, very high cost endpoint device that has the additional graphics card local to that. So as part of this HGX 3D Pro, one of the things we did is 2 years ago we acquired a company called FrameHawk, which was really designed, it was an application or a protocol that was designed to work over high latency, low bandwidth connections that had very specific requirements around the lossiness of the graphics, right? So we introduced FrameHawk as part of our core HGX protocol to be able to support both the server side as well as the endpoint side. So being able to manipulate a graphics image that's being served up by a server in the data center or a virtual machine in the data center going across a high latency, low bandwidth network connection to be able to deliver that same experience. Think of it as in the construction industry, you have, the engineers and the architects that are not always out in the field on the job site, but they need to be able to share a drawing or some type of rendering over to one of the remote construction sites, and oftentimes that was very expensive to do. You had latency issues. You had a lot of the graphics images did not render properly. So included in HGX 3D Pro is the capabilities to do and eliminate the restrictions based on that. The other thing is becoming critical in applications or operating systems such as Windows 10, which are very graphics intensive, and have new applications associated with it that are built around that 3D experience. Being able to leverage once again the Intel Iris Pro graphics card capabilities, and also being able to support multiple monitors. I think multiple monitors it's very seldom that we see it be an exception. It's almost becoming the rule in a lot of organizations where everyone's getting multiple monitors to improve productivity and reduce, to increase that screen space so they can do more with less. So there's a lot of benefits there as well. So can I get the next slide, Alex? The other major enhancement around users, and for those of you who have been Citrix customers for years, I've been with Citrix for 10 years now, and I think almost every conversation includes a comment or a complaint or question around printing. We've included a lot of printing enhancements in our latest version of XenApp and XenDesktop. And part of it is around improving the way the universal print server works. So instead of having to rely on things like a single spool sitting on the server, we can actually now put it as a universal print server that is load balanced, that allows us to deal with things like failover, and more importantly, deal with some of the advanced features now that are coming out in a lot of the printers. So stapling, multi-tray selection capabilities, being able to do more than just the traditional front and back printing. And we're seeing a lot of that coming through as requirements as people start looking at, how do I reduce my IT costs, and organizations find that they have almost as many printers in an organization as they do employees or desktops. So there's been a lot of challenge around that and a lot of improvements that we've introduced around those areas. Can I get the next slide? And one other thing that I mentioned earlier is the coming out of the Linux virtual desktops. What started off as a focus primarily in education and some of the higher end engineering use cases, Linux-based desktops are really becoming pretty standard and pretty normal in a lot of our customers that are looking for task-based machines or considering them for kiosk type of environments. But the operating system and the applications, since they all work well together, and its potential ways to reduce costs, a lot of organizations are starting to look at Linux as a desktop, keep the applications Windows-based, and use Citrix to deliver the applications into a Linux desktop. So there's a lot of benefits there as well. And once again, supporting that 3D Pro graphics, being able to do GPU pass-through, being able to do all of the clipboard functionality, the USB redirection, being able to support multiple monitors, things like that, are also included in here. Can I get the next slide? So the next big area, as we talked about it earlier, the next big area is around security, and it's always, we tend to start thinking about things in terms of the user first, but really in talking with customers and talking with our partners, security is probably first and foremost on everyone's mind. And whether we're talking about the user-based security, network-based security, application data, a variety of different focuses on security, it's becoming a forefront topic, right? And now it's an opportunity for us to get a little bit deeper into that. So if I could get the slide advanced. So the first thing that we talk about is user-based security. And user-based security starts with, how do I maintain and manage all the different accounts that I have? So I've got application level accounts, I've got operating system or desktop level accounts, and then I've got, maybe I have a user ID that I have to get onto my network, and then I've got a whole series of user IDs and passwords that I get onto websites or software as a service providers. So we introduced this capability around federated authentication services. And basically what it does is it allows us to connect all these different identity providers together and be able to manage them from within your Citrix environment. So if I have an application that's running on XenApp, I can connect that out to an identity provider to allow me to do single sign-on, right? If I've got a virtual desktop running XenDesktop, I can use that same identity provider to connect out. I can leverage things like Imprivata, which does a tap-and-go solution for card access. I can have the credentials pass through into the applications, to the desktop, to the data stores, and out to the network services that I need. All with eliminating the need for people to keep passwords on sticky notes or keep them on a file on a desktop called passwords.txt. Being able to have that, being able to reduce that risk and still be able to do it so the user does not have to change the way they do their work to be able to adapt to all of the different security requirements. So if I could get the next slide. So the other enhancements that we've made around security, right, is around being able to detect whether the device has been jailbroken before you can launch the application or connect to the desktop or connect to the application or service. Jailbreak detection, you can check for a watermark, you can check for a variety of different credentials being there. Being able to support all of the receivers and the virtual desktop agents without having to go back to prior versions of TLS. So TLS 1.2 is quickly becoming a standard everywhere, and everyone, we've got solutions around being able to do that. The other area is around doing things like watermarking the sessions, and we'll get into a little bit around the secure browser service. So I've got that as a slide coming up. But really what we want to do there is being able to allow you to have a published browser. And this is something we've been doing and we've recommended for years, but we've actually now introduced it as a service. So instead of having to worry about, do I have the right version of the browser out there, we can actually do a secure browser service to allow that to happen. And finally, being able to do the enhanced smart card authentication, whether you're talking about on the, a lot of times in the public sector, there's requirements for CAP cards. If you're in the military or you're doing work with a government agency, you have to be able to support the common access criteria, aspect of it. The secure browser service, I want to get into this a little bit deeper because this is something, like I said, publishing a browser has been nothing new for Citrix. Publishing it as a service or delivering it as a service has been, that's a new release that we just announced. It can be used internally. Okay, so if you have existing XenApp or XenDesktop environments, you can publish out the browser. You can watermark it and you can brand it however way you'd like to. But what the service allows you to do is take that and move it externally without having to take your internal servers and put them accessible out into the internet or on the other side of the firewall. It allows full whitelisting for sessions. It allows you to monitor where people are coming in from, what they're doing, being able to allow for a pass-through, as well as being able to, like I said, brand it and be able to have better management around that browser. And you can do it for, the HTML5 browsers, as well as you can do it for the prior versions, going back to IE8 as an example. If you want to go further, if you want to go back even further than that, still the recommended way to do that is to take a XenApp server, terminal server type of session, and publish the earlier versions of the browser out there. Because there still are a lot of applications out there, web apps and such, that require specific browser versions, and that's still an extremely viable solution for us. Can I get the next slide? The other area that we want to talk about is around flexibility, right? So this is where we get into the IT. What does it matter to an IT operations focused person, a sysadmin, right? Being able to optimize our daily workflow as an IT professional, being able to, build it once, publish it many times, type of an example. So if we can go ahead and click to the next slide. This is where, when we looked at, Citrix acquired an organization several years ago called Ardens, and basically what it brought with us was the provisioning or PVS aspect of it. And what provisioning service allowed us to do is standardize the operating system. So by standardizing the operating system, I only have to apply patches to that one standardized OS. So think of it as a layer cake approach. And we'll kind of build on this layer cake model. So the first layer of the cake is the operating system. So say, for instance, I use Windows 7 or Windows 10. I don't want to have to rely on Microsoft's update services to go around and push out changes every Tuesday evening. I want to be able to apply the patches once, reboot the machine, and now have every single machine, whether it be virtual or physical, up and running on that standardized operating system layer. Provisioning server gave us, that was the first foray into that. And then we also created a thing called machine creation services, which was built more along the lines of what Link Clones does in a VMware environment. But it allows us to have that standardized instance of the operating system. We've introduced a lot of new capabilities into this provisioning aspect of it, including increasing optimizations, I/O optimizations on the MCS platform by 95%, by introducing some caching technologies, as well as being able to manage it all through a common API with leveraging PowerShell. So anything we can do inside the studio, which is our management console, for building out machines and building out environments, you can also automate with a PowerShell API. So there's a lot of benefits there at that first level of the cake. So if we go up to the next slide. So one of the other organizations that we're teaming up with for provisioning is obviously being able to take that and move it into some of these hyper-converged infrastructure solutions such as Nutanix, and being able to take the provisioning server aspect of it and use it in a virtual machine environment. Like I said earlier, it doesn't matter whether you're a physical device or a virtual device, you can still leverage the provisioning server and really get a lot of the benefits out of there. The benefit of using this layering approach is, once again, I can reduce the amount of work that I have to do on the operating system level and start allowing me to do more of the work on the application, the data, and the access level. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So this is where we want to also include capabilities like, okay, well, monitoring. If we look at the approach of how do I monitor what's going on in my environment. So we've introduced the director, which is more geared towards the operational aspect of it. So if Studio is designed for engineering and building things, director is responsible for operating it and allowing the help desk to work with the users. So director is has full alerting capabilities, monitoring. You can set thresholds. You can do things around capacity management. You can also have it automatically send out notifications to, say, for instance, an application owner when an application is starting to throw out all kinds of questions or concerns. You can also directly integrate it with System Center Operations Manager as well. So if you're an existing System Center customer or you want to go down the path of using System Center to manage your environment, all of the things you can do in Director can be done through System Center as well. And it also has a role-based authentication, role-based administration as well. So if we can go ahead to the next slide. So a lot of organizations are also looking at delivering applications via AppV. And so if we look back at the layer cake approach, right? So AppV is a way to get those applications to that user. Being able to deliver Windows-based applications or services via Microsoft AppV. But more importantly, you can also use a capability called AppDNA, which is a Citrix product, to properly identify, what are the limitations of the application? Will it work on a Windows 10 or is it limited to Windows 7 or prior? Does the application work well in a terminal server environment? Will it work on server 2016? All those questions can be answered leveraging AppDNA. And once again, this is a benefit of having a partner like QTS involved with us. They have the capability of using AppDNA to help you identify what is the best way to deliver that application as part of your Windows 10 migration strategy, right? How do I pick which applications to move up and where's the most appropriate place to run those? And more importantly, how much effort and time is it going to take to go and upgrade those apps? Or it could be an upgraded app or it could be a potential replace of the app, either one. So if I can get the next slide. But it's not just limited to AppV, so we also have the capability of doing AppDisk, which think of it as a departmental disk. So once again, if we look at the layer cake approach, we have our Windows operating system that's being delivered via provisioning server or MCS. We have common applications that are applicable to the entire organization, so think of that as your Office products. And then you have a couple of other applications that are either based on an employee's department or some type of role that they have. So as an example, they may have Adobe Illustrator, or they may have some type of Adobe Distiller as two separate application layers that they want to be on, that they want to be able to have. These are assembled in real time, right? So if a user signs in they're going to have the operating system and all the appropriate applications assigned to them and delivered to their virtual desktop or their virtualized application server as needed. But once again, this is something that you can leverage the experience that QTS has to help define this a little bit more as far as what you want to do. The benefit of here is that I don't need to be limited to when the operating system gets updated, I may not have to go and upgrade the entire application stack or make any changes to it, and likewise I can make changes to the application without always having to update the operating system level itself. So it makes the management of this environment much more streamlined and much more efficient. And what happens with that is users have less downtime, less interruptions in service, and it also allows you to do things like rolling back. A couple of things that we're also looking at is, support for, how do I manage a set of VMs? How do I reach down into the hypervisor, whether it be Hyper-V or Acropolis with Nutanix? Some streamlining with the streamlining consolidations of those different layers. Also, being able to dynamically attach new applications based on not the user logging in and booting up the machine, but also it could be based on time of day. So you want an application to disappear after you're allowed to accept orders. We can do that as well. Okay. Next slide, please. And the other aspect of it is, organizations that have multiple sites, multiple locations, or multiple data centers as an example, right? You want to be able to assign different policies based on where they are, and also include things like preferences. So being able to say, if I'm a user coming in from Europe, I'm going to hit a European data center first. They may hit a Asia Pacific data center second, and then they may hit the US data center on third. There's a variety of different ways to do that. One is you can do it on the networking layer. This is also talking about doing it on the application or the virtual desktop layer. Okay, so the next slide, please. And finally, one of the next big things we've updated is around our storefront. So, think of this as one app store for your organization, where the user can go in. They have access to applications. It could be based on their role. Applications could be kind of put together or grouped based on the accounting department or our New York-based employees. They could have access based on where they, not only where they're located, but also what department they're in, and having what they have rights to. The other thing is place to go do things like reset your password and doing that self-service capabilities, being able to support all of the machines that are out there. So you don't have to have the domain joined machine to be able to use the storefront or to be able to use the applications or services that are provided. The other thing is this entire thing can be watermarked and built to look like your existing intranet, or they can be designed or branded based on your organization's needs. So it doesn't always have to be a standard Citrix storefront look and feel. So there's some huge benefits there as well. Can I get the next slide, please? And the other thing that we want to talk about, since obviously QTS is a very large Microsoft partner with us, a lot of organizations are having challenges or questions about how do I move to Windows 10. There's some great tools that are available to kind of help organizations look at different strategies for Windows 10 migrations. Some of those are not always going to be the traditional Windows migrations, where you replace it with you replace your new hardware and you get the Windows 10 loaded on it. In some cases, you may be buying a Windows 10 device, but you need to still access applications that are resident in a Windows 7 or earlier environment. So we've got strategies around that. We've also got strategies around taking a look at the Windows Server 2016. We have a tech preview that's available now to take a look at. Organizations that are looking at System Center, right? So we have what's referred to as SCOM packs, which are System Center Operations Management packs, and that allows you to manage the Citrix environment from within your System Center. And finally, the real-time optimization packs, which should be out later on this quarter for Skype for Business. So there's a lot of benefits around there. And I'm going to let Alex kind of wrap it up here, and we've got some Q&A. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them, but I'll let Alex kind of take it from here.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much, Shad. So I'm just going to scoot on over to our conclusions here. So those are some great new features and great new updates, and I really enjoyed what you guys have done with, just embracing the graphics stuff. So as far as QTS is concerned, Todd was right on the money. So we are a Microsoft partner through and through. We actually structure our service delivery around the Microsoft Solutions Framework. So all of our offerings coincide with the MSF, whether it be our quick design engagements or quick starts or quick deploys. Any of these you can feel free and shoot me an email or contact your QTS account manager, and we can elaborate on what some of those are a little bit further and how we might be able to leverage any vouchers you may have or for planning services or strategy to get you guys where you need to be. So as far as next steps are concerned, based around what's going on with Citrix, you can engage us for a roadmap strategy meeting and see how we can leverage that for your environment, really. We can do the planning services vouchers, or with our quick design planning services agreement, say that 10 times fast, and really talk about, what is a game plan for your organization? What does it look like? We can also engage some of our training partners, or we can get you connected with Citrix if that's where we need to be. But not last, but certainly not least, please join QTS and Citrix on September 13th for Quick Envision, our 9th annual customer conference. If you haven't gotten an email from me or from Neil or any of the QTS staff about it, you probably will. We're just about coming up on a month away, and we are super excited and cannot wait. Citrix is going to have a featured guest speaker on our lunchtime panel, as well as send a couple of resources as well, so you can interact and answer any really in-depth technical questions. So I'm going to open it up right now. See if we can get some Q&A going in here. All right. So if there's anyone that has questions, feel free. We are unmuting the lines. You can also use the questions section down at the bottom if you want to type one. Okay, going once. Going twice. All right. Well, guys, thanks again so much. We really appreciate you tuning in today, and definitely look forward to the next in our series. And thank you again to Todd and the Citrix team.